Hey everybody, this is Dark Guards, and we're back with another video. And now from yesterday's video, which was actually uploaded this morning-ish, kind of. Upload times are weird, but we worked on JUnit, we got some JUnit done. I actually have finished most of the JUnit for the radiation systems and stuff. So we got the radiation chunk fully tested. I did figure out there was so many issues with how the code was implemented. And it really just came down to me coding while I was half asleep. And this is the reason why we do JUnit, is we go through, we can test everything, and we can make sure things are working. So when I was doing testing, we actually left off at the save load code. And we were getting to the saving, and we're getting stuff, and I was getting an error where it was going index out of bounds. Basically, this one was setting a really high value, this one went to go set a low value, and went to go try to do that, and it failed because the layers were not setting up correctly. To kind of express how this works is when we go to set this, we actually grab a layer. When it gets the layer, it'll initialize it if it is missing. If it's the value we're trying to get is lower than our Y start, we'll increase our array size and then move it backwards. And if we're greater than our Y endpoint, we'll increase our array size lengthwise. And of course, if we don't have a layer, we'll make a layer, and so on and so on. There was a few things going on that weren't working appropriately. Most of this code down here was working. Like, I didn't even have to change this code. This code was working perfectly fine. One of the things that wasn't working is the increase was a little off. I basically was trying to do math in my head, and when doing math in your head, it's a bad idea. Always write down your math. Even if you think you're a genius, write it down. You will fail to do math in your head at least once or twice and causing problems. The other issue that was having problems with is when I was doing the Y start, I was going, okay, we're going to make an array of 11, and then I want my Y start to be in the middle. It's what my brain was telling me. That was not at all how that should have worked. The Y start needed to be the start of the array, which is how the design specification was built, and I don't even understand how my brain thought we were going to put the Y start in the middle. I think my brain was going, okay, the middle of the array is here, and we want to make sure we're moving by the middle of the array, because when I build GUI components, I build other things, I move by the middle of the object, not by the edge of the object, because it makes it a lot easier if you need to resize the object and move it around. It makes your life kind of easy, depending on what you're doing, of course. But, so that got wrong, that was broken. And that was only discovered because when we were doing the unit testing, this introduced a high Y start. So this was really close to the top of the array, and it was initializing with a Y start that was inappropriate. So this would create a value, and it would go, okay, my Y start's going to be 230 something plus 5, which would have happened right here. So we actually, I think it was minus 5 is what ended up happening here. So that, our Y start would not have been the correct value, and then our array would have also, our array worked perfectly fine. Our array's in the correct size and everything was supposed to be, but the Y start was inappropriately. So as the array expanded, it created the wrong values. So one, we got the Y start was not expanding properly. Two, when we got down here, we created another issue that because the Y star was at the wrong location, when it finally got down to increasing the array size, it went to go increase it, it would create a new array, and it would build up the new array. This array, in some cases, could already be 256 in size when it shouldn't have been, and then when it went to go copy the array again, it would crash right here. That's the reason why I have test further up here. So we do the test every 8. The test every 8 actually can trigger the code to resize a lot quicker and does uncover these issues. I also did a test reverse where we actually increased the array from the top to the bottom. This also uncovered the issues because our first value is going to be 255, so our array is going to have to initialize that top chunk, which should trigger the issue right away, and then we're expanding backwards. So this is going to make sure that this code right here is always being run and always being tested to make sure it's running. And then of course we got the expand forward, which is going to run this code down here because our first Y value is going to be set to 0, so we're going to get a Y. To be honest, this Y start initialize would be wrong if I just left it Y minus 10, hence why you get the 0 there. That's another fix that was implemented. I actually think that Y max was already in there to start with. So that'll set to 0, that'll size out. So that works perfectly fine. Going from 0 to up works perfect. I mean, there's no problems with that. That's a really easy, simple calculation. The calculation that was running into issues was, of course, increasing it backwards. And then, of course, setting up things. So that's all fixed. That's all there. We've now wasted the first 4 minutes of this video talking about other things. So beyond testing, of course, not much progress. I'm doing all the backend stuff, all the boring stuff. People that will look at it and go, it's okay, I'm waiting for content. Show us content. So I don't have content for you, but what I do have is I'm working on the visualization software again. I know people go, visualization software, it's boring, it's mathematics, but it is a very useful tool. So we've got the calculator, which I've been working on again some more. One, it's now separated into tasks. So you have ICB and Classic and Math. The math stuff has been shifted to a different tab. I'm actually going to build this software to theoretically have a tab per mod. I know I said I was going to probably build a mod or a calculator per mod, but this application is so small and so easy to use, I'm just going to do it this way. And then in theory, in the future, what I'm going to do is probably embed this into a website. So you have a website you can pop open, and you can run the calculations from the website, and you can actually test your theory to see, like, hey, if we calculate a path, what will the path look like? If we calculate our accuracy, what will our accuracy look like? And of course, you got the blast threads, everything else. This is one I don't know if I showed this one off yet. I'll go check my video history, and if I haven't shown this one off, I'll talk about this one in the future. And of course, we've got the visualization for this. The red matter explosion, by the way, does not work anything like this anymore when it comes to the render code, so I'm going to have to redo this entire calculator. And of course, we got the gas cloud, which does everything else. But the parts that were added over here is the math app. So I'm working on inverse square law. So people have done mathematics and actually done a lot more advanced mathematics probably know what this is. It's basically, if you have some kind of object that works on an intensity level that declines over distance, you use something like this. This is particularly used for light and everything else, but what it's used for as well is calculating radiation. For those who don't really understand how radiation works, when a radioactive material decays, it will emit particles. It'll emit alpha, beta, it'll emit photons, neutrons, stuff like that. These are the things that actually hit you that will actually cause you damage. People get the misconception that when you have a radioactive material, what's happening is that the radioactive material is doing some kind of magic to you, or is emitting little parts of itself, and those parts are hitting you and then they're causing damage. You actually don't get hit by the radioactive material itself. You get hit by radiation. Radiation happens to be X-rays, gamma rays, and of course different particles and photons and stuff like that. You get hit by those things. Now, when you get hit by those things, they release energy into your body, and that high amount of energy hitting you is what actually damages your cells and does everything else. Now, this energy decays over distance. And the reason it decays over distance, if I can find the article here, because there's an article, or rather a Wikipedia page that I was using for this, and I know Wikipedia, it's not a very good source, but it works for the most part simply because... Let's see if I can find it, actually. That's right, it should be sitting in the atomic science code, because I'm working on the atomic science code, I was working on the map code. Getting ready to start doing all the calculations needed to finally start calculating how much radiation you're going to be exposed to on each block you're standing on. Speaking of which, how the radiation is going to be done, right now we're just going to calculate where you're standing at, so where your feet are touching the ground. Eventually, how this will actually work is I will calculate multiple points across your body. So what I want to do is I want to calculate foot level, knee level, waist level, chest level, and then head level. And then I want to apply slightly different modifications of radiation because your legs are going to absorb different radiation than your head. And then we're going to add these all together and average them out so you get an average hit value, because I don't want to make it too complicated, so we're not going to do an individual body part radiation, even though realistically that's how it would work. Each part of your body handles radiation differently. For example, your eyes are very sensitive to radiation. You can blind yourself very quickly. It's the reason why if you get exposed to radiation, your eyes are one of the first things to go. A lot more sensitive organs, except like the brain takes a lot of damage, liver and everything takes a lot of damage, but then your intestines just don't give a crap. It's a good example of that. We have that, so we're doing that, and there should be somewhere in here, and like it's missing. Let me see if I get Control Z. Oh no, it's right there. I knew Control Z would have saved me. Okay, so here's the article. Let me go ahead and open the webpage for this. So Wikipedia's got a thing on inverse square law, and one of the things they have in here is a picture. So this explains why this is used for things. It's not that at a distance there's less, you're being exposed to less in terminology. It's at a distance there is less. It's actually what the better way I wanted to say that. It's not that at distance the energy is weaker. You're still getting hit by relative the same energy because a light beam when it travels carries about the same amount of energy no matter what. What happens is the light beam disperses. Or in this case, the radiation beam disperses. So as it gets further and further away, it's kind of the ideal that when you shine a flashlight, let me get a paint out here. So when you shine a flashlight, so say you have, and let's see if I can actually draw today. I cannot draw. So you have a flashlight, and you shine it, and you get this beam that goes out, and it goes out like a circle. So most people are familiar with this. Most everybody's used a flashlight, or they've used the flashlight on their camera, and you'll get a bigger circle. This is the concept that when you do a light beam and you're transmitting it out, it disperses over distance and kind of does that thing. Radiation does the same exact thing. It's just that we can't see radiation with our eyes, of course, or we would see something similar going on. It's also the reason why, if you have a light source right here, why you have a circle kind of glow around it, is that the light is traveling out in all distances. Well, actually, this actually has nothing to do with the inverse square law, but it's kind of a good way to think about it, is that you've got it traveling out in all distances and everything else. And as it travels out, it'll get less bright. So like right around here, you'll be very bright, but then you get over here and it's not so bright, and then you've got like almost nothing over here. Now that's basically inverse square law, is to think about it in terms of light and particles and everything else. So we're using this, and it does basically this. And when we're calculating radiation, we do the same exact thing. We use the inverse square law because we want to figure out how many radiation particles and rays and everything else you're being hit by as a character, and we need to be able to calculate that. Now the source of the radiation is of course going to be the radioactive material of the block. So say somebody drops an item on the ground, then this will be your item, and it'll be emitting particles out in distance. Now how we're going to calculate this is just going to have a radiation value, because there's trying to calculate it realistically by actually calculating the number of particles that are going out and then ray tracing, because if you want to do this perfectly, you would basically make particles transmit off the item and then ray trace those, and then every time that ray hit a player, you would apply radiation over and over and over again, which would result in a very, very nice system, but your computer would never be able to run it. It would be something I'd have to go throw on a supercomputer. But in terminology of actual gameplay, what we will do is we just calculate a single value, and then we go, okay, the player is standing over here at the R3 ring, and we go, well, we're going to have so much radiation at that distance, and it's simply going to do is, like, say we have a 1 over here, we're going to end up with like a 0.1 over here. And then we do that for every source of radiation around you, which this is where the part is going to actually be kind of somewhat intensive, and I'm still kind of thinking about if we're going to thread this or not. It is going to be cached though, so there will always be a cached value of it, and that cache will be refreshed every time new materials added to the world and everything else. But then that's where we got this calculation here. So we got the inverse square calculation here, is to kind of see what's going on. So in this case, I've got it dumped into an intensity of 100 radiation, and I want to figure out how much radiation we're going to be exposed to at 100 meters. And we're tracking it over here. So at about 10 meters, you've already dropped the 1 rad value. That's what this basically, when you start getting near 0 is when we start getting about near 1. Is as soon as it drops under 1, this sets this value over here. And that's 10 meters. So with 100 radiation, and that's 100 radiation at 1 meter away. So if we measure it at 1 meter, which we're actually probably going to modify that code, it'll actually probably be like 0.1, and we can actually test it over here. So say this was 100 radiation at like 0.01 is where we measured it at. And we want to calculate how much radiation you're going to have that. This actually will change the equation. You can see right there how dramatically that equation just changed. You went from 100 radiation up there to instantaneous drop. And this is where the inverse square law is really cool, though I don't think it's actually designed to do values as small. I think it messes the equation up a lot. But we do this, and we measure this, so it provides a really realistic kind of gameplay mechanic. It also provides cool, interesting things. For example, if you just stand far enough away from the radiation source, you're not going to die from radiation as a player. This means that radiation is going to be less of a critical factor, but it also means that it's still a thing, and it also means we can kind of modulate it as well. So you get exposed to radiation slowly over time, so when you're near radiation, you're not just going to instantly fall over dead, you're going to slowly be exposed, it's going to slowly build up over time, and then eventually your character will suffer consequences and die. So it's going to be less of a critical thing. Of course, I'll add scale values to this in the config for those players that want to make this more of a thing rather than less of a thing and everything else. We can mess with this calculation all the time and do all kinds of cool things. Like, here's a better way to look at it as well. So this is where we're, oh yeah, the value's never going to set because it never gets near 0. So down here you can see at 10 meters, you're going to hit by 5 radiation. So if you had a radiation source of 100 rads, being exposed from, say, like a nuclear barrel or something, go down as you get closer. So at 5 meters from the system, you're getting hit by 100. And as you get to like about 6, actually this is one grid size. I'm messing this up. I forgot in my earlier test I set it to grid size of 5, and I guess we're going to set it to grid size of 11. And let's actually set this to a grid size of 0.5 so we can actually look at it. That looks horrible. But so 1 meter getting hit by 100. As soon as you just get a little bit away from it, you immediately drop to basically down by like 25%. That's kind of like, I think, how the inverse square law works, is it just keeps decaying by percentage. And there's a lot of really nice equations online for this. There's a lot of really nice documentation that explains this. Like, there's a lot of safety regulations that's designed around the inverse square law, and it basically says for every distance you double, you basically drop your risk exposure by a huge factor. And just also having something like shielding in front of you. This is one of the things that I'm also working on the inverse square law for the mod, is that we want to do basic shielding. So just by having just anything in front of you between you and the radiation source is going to make a huge difference in the radiation exposure. Of course, we're going to do this via ray traces and stuff, because after all, it's tracing a ray between you and the target, or between the source into you. So if it can't make contact, or if, say, if it hits a stone wall, that radiation source is going to stop. And that's how we're going to actually do it. I know it's going to make the gameplay kind of a little strange, because you may go from one room with no radiation to the next room with 100 radiation, but it works. It also means it'll be a lot easier to do radiation protection. Radiation cleanup won't be as hard, and should result in some interesting gameplay where you can actually have radiational worlds and various other things that will not instantly kill you. Anyways, that's all I wanted to show off with this little thing and talk about different mechanics. Hopefully here eventually I'll have some actual content to show you. I know the next visualization software we're going to be working on is I'm going to be working on a grid-based thing to kind of look at how radiation is going to spread. I'm going to be looking at using this inverse square law to calculate how much radiation you're going to see per thing, so like a heat map. And there's going to be a few other things we're going to work on, but I'll show those off as they're being built, and I'll see you guys later.